Welcome to the Shawn Douglas Show. This is where we talk about life as a creative, an outlier, and someone who doesn't quite fit the mold. If you're struggling with finding balance, if you feel like a freak, if you're trying to find your place in this world, then this podcast is for you. And hey, you also catch some random, just for fun stuff along the way, because life's too short to be all serious. Okay, now that we have that intro out of the way, I just wanted to introduce myself here on this inaugural podcast, and I'm trying to do something different that I haven't really done before. I'm doing something that's kind of like, I guess, a video journaling in a way, and just sharing about my struggles and what I've dealt with as a creator. And I want to answer a lot of the kind of issues and problems that people have dealing with the hustle and trying to find balance in life as a creative individual, wanting to make it in the world, doing what you really love to do. And, you know, it's not always easy by any means for any of us, but it's especially hard when you're an outlier and when you're different from everyone else, and when you are choosing a non-conventional path and a non-traditional way of life. So understanding that very personally, very intimately, my last job that I had as a customer service agent at a certain, let's say, at a certain sporting goods corporation, wasn't that great for me. It really burnt me out of the whole corporate scene, really showed me that that's not something for me, something I don't really want to do with my life. And that really taught me that I need to go all out for myself in business and entrepreneurial pursuits and creative things. I'm just not suited for that cubicle lifestyle or just the grind of the industry. It just does not really suit me. It does not work for me. So I get tired of things very quickly after I've sort of learned the basics and the things that I need to know. Unless there's a clear path of progression, unless there's more things that I can get into, that I can learn more and I can expand further and gain new skills and abilities, if I don't have that opportunity, I burn out fast. And I experienced that firsthand when I worked way too much overtime when I was at that customer service position. It was definitely the experience that finally just, I had it. And after that, I was like, I have to figure out what I'm really going to do with my life. I'm not going to climb up the corporate ladder. I'm not going to just do what everybody else is doing. I need something that really works for me. I need something that really allows me to be creative and learn and do my best and put myself out there. And one thing that I actually learned from that job was I actually enjoyed connecting with people, you know, and before that, I kind of had that whole mantra that a lot of people will say these days, I hate people, like, oh, people are so terrible or whatever. And I learned from that job, like, I really liked my customers. I really enjoyed the people I was talking to. We had great conversations. I could defuse them and bring them down from whatever bad mood they were in, or, you know, how upset or irritated they were. And a lot of times they had a good reason to be, because they'd been on the phone line for a good hour or 2 hours, and they held on that long, so they were pretty irritated by the time they finally got to the person that they were trying to talk to. Sometimes, too, I had coworkers that didn't do a very good job by them, and so they would get to me, and so I'd have to kind of talk them down and just be really nice and friendly and helpful as I could be, and make it clear that that's what I was trying to do. And, you know, by the time it's all said and done, we're basically laughing, you know, and it's like we're old friends at that point. But they would tell me over and over again, you know, so many different ones of them. I would say maybe 20%, 10 or 20% of the people would be like, hey, you know, do you do radio? Like, you have a voice for radio. Like, you should be doing something, you know, and I'd be like, well, thank you. But other than that, it's like, yeah, no, this is what I'm doing for now. But it's not like I didn't get anything from that job or from my other experiences. I learned things, you know, I picked up skills, I picked up some stuff, and I definitely learned what I don't want to do with my life. And another side effect that was the best thing that I got out of that job was that's actually where I met my wife. And it was a pretty crazy story that we have of how we actually ended up eventually getting together. But I'll save that for a different time and share it then. But anyway, the whole job seeing thing just did not work for me. It was not something that I enjoyed. It was not something I did well with. And I realized I needed to take time, and I took a sabbatical. I got away from that job, and I spent time just kind of doing soul searching and trying to figure out what is it I really want to do with my life? What is it that I'm really here for? And what I kept coming back to is like what I've always loved to do is creating content, is making, whether it's audio, whether it's video, whether it's images. My dad had me using Adobe Photoshop on our old Macintosh computers back in the 90s and in early 2000s, and I was doing that stuff when I was like 9 years old, and it was nothing. I was playing around with the filters, the KPT3 filters, and for those of you that remember, and I was playing with Bryce and different software, and I had fun with that stuff. I loved that stuff, and I had even older software on my old computer. It was kind of like a precursor to today's DAWs for, whether it's Audacity or what have you. I was playing around with sound and doing scripting. We had this game for our computer called Hollywood, where you had these cartoon characters and you could script them and have them, make little skits, and it was kind of like already programmed word sync, and it was using the early Macintosh text-to-speech capabilities, and which they were way ahead of the times with that. So I had a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff, and later on in life, I just thought, you have to work a job. You've got to find something that works out there, whatever seems to be right there in front of you, and you just got to get an income, and that's all there is to it. And so I forgot about a lot of those things that I did as a kid that I loved to do. But I ended up, because of friends of mine, I ended up in a podcast, and they had invited me just to come on as a guest because they were just trying to promote the thing and get it started. And they thought, hey, you're fun. You've got a personality that we can work with, and just come on as a guest, and let's just talk about the things that we talk about. And they were pop culture based, and they just enjoyed talking about movies and video games, and just nerding out on that kind of pop culture stuff. So I had fun with them, and they after that I was invited the second time, and at that point they were like, hey, how would you like to be a member of the podcast, and you could be our third founding member. And I was like, sure, this is fun, and this really reminds me of something, and I couldn't think back to exactly what, but over time I realized, oh my goodness, this is what I was doing as a kid, and now I'm just doing it as an adult. So I really had high hopes for that podcast. I thought that together we could really make something that would get out there. I thought we could beat Joe Rogan and come up with something that would really be entertaining, and we had the right mixture of personalities and all that kind of stuff, and I was loving it. And I got basically put in charge of being the editor of the podcast because nobody else had the time, and I enjoyed editing, though up to a certain point. After a while, it was becoming really troublesome having to be the sole editor all the time, and it became really difficult, and we lost one of our main founding members for various reasons, and it got to a point where it was stale. It wasn't the same thing, and I kind of realized that I wasn't really in love with the content anymore. I didn't really enjoy what it was that we were doing, and it didn't resonate with me with purpose and meaning. So I decided at a certain point, this really isn't working for me, and it's pointing me in the right direction, I know, but it's not what I need to be doing with my life. And I realized that I had a whole other adventure ahead of me, and this was just before I actually married my wife, and we had an entire mission before us to actually go to Ohio, and we're going to go help young couples that were just starting. We're going to basically counsel them, work through things that were getting in the way of their life. My wife has a background of having been through abuse in various forms, and she was kidnapped. She endured a lot of horrible things, and she's come out on the other side and has really healed, and she has a lot of resilience, and we've learned a lot through the process of the things that she's gone through. So we were going to use a lot of that knowledge and and help others to sort through these kinds of problems and relationships and things going on inside of themselves, healing inner wounds. And so I knew I had to break ties with the podcast, and it was hard. It was very, very hard for me. And honestly, I wish I'd done it better. That was not my finest moment. Like, I didn't know how to set up boundaries. I didn't know how to really communicate what was going on with me right then. I just kind of quiet quit to a certain extent and avoided one of the members of the podcast because I knew that he was going to be really hurt and upset, and I sort of left it to the other. It was his cousin to basically tell him, where I was coming from. And honestly, even for him, I didn't really explain things well enough, and I wish I had. I wish I had been more courageous at the time, but I was working through a lot of things at that time. I was working through a lot of my own fears, and just honestly, like, it's still something that I struggle with, is the desire for approval and hating to disappoint people that I really care about, that I'm close to. And that's a challenge for me. That was a challenge for me then. It's still a challenge for me now. I think I've come pretty far from where I was that 5.5, 6 years ago, but it's definitely something that I look back, and honestly, I'm not ashamed of it. I don't, entirely regret it. I do partly regret it. I wish for them that I had done a better job in how I stepped away from it, but I also know that was the best I could do at that time. So anyway, that's kind of my background and where I got started. And then over the years, I've done different things. I did another podcast with my wife where we talked about relationships. We talked about, what it's like to basically live a life that, in our crazy society, that's stable and that's balanced and incorporates God, incorporates, healthy spirituality, and, just dealing with our own internal issues, having balance, having a good life. And of course, just, it was so important, is so important to us still, just the whole issue of relationships, and especially for dating, or for people that are at that point of having their person in their life and getting up to the steps of getting married, and then afterwards married life and friendships. Like, those were things that we were very concentrated on with that podcast, and it's our still core tenets and things of our lives, because we realize for our generation, we're the younger of the millennials, the younger half of the millennials, just bridging into zillennials basically. And for us, we definitely see a lack of friendship. And, we all grew up on Friends, the TV show. We all grew up on these ideas of having people in our life that we could really be a part of, and being close to family and all of that. But a lot of us, we didn't really have it. We have ended up kind of alone in life. High school was not good for us. We were very, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know for a lot of us, there was just bullying, and there was disconnect, and things ended up where it's just like, okay, what from here? What now? Now you're thrown into the adult world, and what are you supposed to do at this point? And everybody's going in their own directions. Your friends maybe went off and got married, had their kids, or got jobs in other states or whatever, and now you are here and you're alone. And I kind of experienced that in my own way. Even though I was homeschooled, I moved around the country a lot. We moved all over the place. My dad contracted, and a lot of my friendships just kind of, petered out. They were still in Ohio, where I was originally from. They went on and had their own lives and did their own things, and it's hard doing long distance relationships. But just especially when they have a lot of people in their life already and a lot of things going on. So basically, that's where I'm coming from, is as a millennial that has found myself on the other side of this, and realizing and rediscovering, like, you know what? I don't actually like to be alone. I don't like to be isolated. As much as I, in the past, tried to tell myself I'm individualistic and I like being by myself, I like doing my own thing, I'm an introvert, I'm good with doing things alone, and I don't need people, and all of that, I'm independent. I ended up realizing that it's like, well, there's some truth to that. I have resilience. I have the ability to find fun by myself, find enjoyment. I can be occupied with my own thoughts, and I'm happy with them. They're not dark and terrible thoughts. And even if I am thinking about, deep things or heavy things, it's not tormenting me. It's not keeping me up at night. I'm just kind of working through the issues and stuff in life when I'm thinking about things. So I'm happy when I'm thinking about things. I'm happy when I'm not being interrupted. But I also really am a person that loves people. I'm a people person. And despite my being introverted in a lot of ways, I also have enough of the extroversion in me that, I need other people and I enjoy other people. And, at a certain level, at a certain point, I do need a break and I need time to recharge. I need time to go off on my own. I can be overwhelmed by crowds. I used to struggle with crowd anxiety and what it was like to be, just sort of socially, boxed in, feeling claustrophobic. Not as much anymore because I've really worked through it, over the years. I've exposure therapy of my own. And through just, kind of working through the physical side of things, the sympathetic nervous system, learning to get more into my parasympathetic nervous system, learning to calm myself down, do breathing, pay attention to me tensing my body, control the inner dialogue, just different things, different techniques. So it's not as hard for me as it used to be, and I've learned a lot along the way. But, so much of what held me back in the past and so much of what kept me just pinned in where I was at was just fear. And I was afraid of opening up to something different. I was afraid of trying to find new people. I was afraid of what it would be like to become competent at stepping outside of my comfort zone, to become competent at reaching out to other people. And I've been learning to do that. I've been learning to build relationships. I've been learning to create around me a community and my own family. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And that's something I've been learning to do. And my wife and I have both been learning to do it. She's actually naturally an extrovert, but for her, because her parents were very introverted and they had her very busy. They were very busy and she was very busy with the things that they had her involved with. She was basically just zipping from one thing to the next and didn't really get the chance, didn't have time to develop strong relationships with peers, with people her age, and all the people that she basically counted as her friends were basically older than her, were like teachers and not those that she could actually really relate to at that point in her walk in life. So close friendships wasn't something that she had a lot of, and she didn't know how to really just open up about the things that were going on in her life. So she always felt like a freak and an outsider, on top of just the fact that her tastes and her interests were different from the small class that she grew up with because she went to a private school. So she came out kind of being introverted on the exterior of what it seems like, but in reality she thrives when she's around people, and she's been learning to come out of her shell and fully be the extrovert that she really is. And she's energized and she loves being around people, and she really just can't get too much of it. I need a break eventually, but she does really well. And as long as I can find a little corner somewhere that I can just quietly sit and not be disturbed for a minute, then I'm good to go again after maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. But it's a great dynamic, and we have a lot of fun together. And that's a great thing too. As an introvert, like, you don't really get tired of the person that you're married to. Like, they are the other half of your soul. They're the other part of you, and you could do anything together. You love being together. You love hearing their voice. It's a wonderful thing when you're married to the right person, when you have the right person in your life. So I'm very blessed to have that. Thank God every day for that. Basically, I guess I'll get into this a little bit. So what I want to talk about today is the tension between the inner critic versus what you are authentically meant for. And, you could ask, like, what exactly do I mean by that? What is that about? Swatting gnats and ants out here. My office is the outdoors of Texas, and East Texas is beautifully green with all the rain that we've been having, and it's full of bugs, as always, whether or not we've had any rain. So this is what I'm working with here. Central question. Whose voice are you listening to? And how do you fight by resting? That's an interesting tension, when you think about it. Like, we're in a battle, right? We have enemies, we have allies, we have tests and challenges and things that we go through. And, we're all on this hero's journey because we're looking to discover who we really are and what we're meant to produce and do in the world around us. And, the hero's journey arc is this idea that you have to get out into the unknown and leave what was familiar to you and find answers for yourself and bring a solution back to the people where you came from. And, that's a repeating mythos that you see throughout history. While it can be over-exaggerated in as far as it being in every single story ever, it's in a lot of them. And it's really something that we see that's just so archetypal to human nature and our life and our history and what we're doing as human beings. And it's a part of how we just, have codified and understood this process of personal development and how we become the person that we're meant to be. So on this hero's journey, we encounter enemies, we encounter allies, and we encounter tests. And enemies can actually be really useful. They help us understand what we're really up against. They help us deal with basically the voices that are inside of us already, the excuses, the arguments, the things that are saying that we're wrong. Our enemies flesh out those arguments, flesh out those ideas inside of us that are conflicting with our vision, are conflicting with what we really want in our life. And so they're actually doing us a favor. And I did a short about this. I did a quick clip on YouTube and I put it out there on TikTok and other places. And, I want to expand on that further and really talk about it. But we had a recent incident where we had a lady who was basically just dogging us for our lifestyle, just slamming us for what she thought we should be doing differently. And she thought we were being irresponsible and just getting all over us because we weren't just being normal in their mind and what they thought we should do. Sure, we're not like just massively successful right now. We're not massively known for our content creating or anything right now. And, we're in a less than perfect position where we're living, but we're happy as we are. And yes, we have things that we want to do in our life that we're not at that point yet. We can't do it yet, but we're really getting somewhere and we can tell that, we feel that, and we know that we're doing what we were meant to do. So it's not all about money and it's not all about everybody else's approval. It's very important that what we do because it's what we love and because it really matters to us. And yeah, it needs to be sustainable, obviously. We need to figure out how to bring in the finances and bring in the things that we need so that it's sustainable. But sometimes there are leaps of faith. Sometimes there are risks to take. Sometimes we have to go after something for a long time when it doesn't make sense to others. And we have to do what really is for us the right thing, even if it seems crazy to other people. And especially if you maybe feel like it's the voice of God. Like this is something bigger. Like you were placed in this universe for this reason. And anybody that tries to get you off from that, that's probably the voice of the enemy. That is an enemy in your life. Not that you have to hate them, not that you have to be against them. It doesn't mean that they want to destroy you, but what it does mean is you've just found the example. You just found the person that really, really voices the doubts and fears and things that you're already dealing with in your head and what other people are going to say and are going to use against you. So that's hard at first, and that hurts, and that's difficult, and it makes it difficult for you to move forward. But it also helps you identify that in yourself so that you can begin to work on that, and you can remove that target for them to hit. It doesn't have to be so readily available for them anymore. So what I've been learning is basically to identify my enemies and realize, oh yeah, that's what I do not want to have coming in and sabotaging my mind and sabotaging my thinking. And most importantly, it's identifying the internal enemy. So that helps. And so I don't use those labels to diminish their value as human beings. I don't use it to excuse myself for doing unrealistic things or having ideas that are just ungrounded. I do have to have allies too. I do have to have people that I can consult who aren't just telling me, they're not just yes men. They're not just telling me that I'm right about everything. You know, they need to be capable of giving me some pushback and letting me know if I am getting off into something that's just like, it's not going to work, or it's just my own crazy thinking. I need soundboards. Not every idea that we have is a great idea, but we should have freedom to have those ideas. We should have freedom to think those things through, to try things out. And your real allies are going to be people that are supportive of you working through the process of sorting things out and figuring out what's right for you and what will work in your life and what's going to move you, you know, in the right direction, where you actually have happiness, where you actually have fulfillment, where things are what you really need to be, and you pursue the values that are really best for you and what really is meant for your life. So this leads back to the point that rest is warfare. And what do I mean by that? Well, your enemies are going to push you and just work on you with every bit of them. They're going to worry you and torment you and try to get you to quit doing the things that you know you really need to do. You know, if it's being a content creator, then, you know, they're going to be trying to push you to do something else other than content creating. If it's pottery, you know, they're going to be trying to tell you that's not realistic. You can't make money that way. You need to go do this other thing, or you can do that as a hobby on the side or whatever. And they're going to try in every way to get into your head and make you feel that, you know, what you're trying to do is impossible. They're going to undermine and try to make you discouraged. And that's the main thing you always find, is that enemies try to discourage you. Enemies try to redirect you and misdirect you to things that you're not really made for, things that really won't work for you. And a lot of times what you're going to notice is that they don't know you well enough to actually tell you the things that they're telling you. They're coming off of their own bias, and they just have a problem with you, and they have a problem with the direction in life that you're trying to go. You know, it might be jealousy. It might be that they see something in you that reminds them of someone else that they really don't like, or that they've had a problem with in the past. It can be many different things, but ultimately, they're not on your side. They're not looking out for you. They're not giving you good advice. They're just trying to tear you down, and they're trying to get you, you know, stuck in your own head in a bad space. So that's what you need to realize, is they're trying to get you in a place of chaos, you know, where your mind is just all over the place and you're bouncing around and you're worried and you can't focus on the things that you're really meant to do. You know, that's in a boxing match or an MMA, the kind of psychological warfare they do is trying to get in the other guy's head and get him to where he can't really be focused and fight smart. You know, he's getting upset or disturbed or confused or bewildered. And it's the same thing in life. And so you want to notice when that's happening and learn from that, and also figure out where those weak spots are that they're exploiting. Because a lot of times it's going to be the same insecurities. It's going to be the same things that you get hit on that are going to come up over and over again. You need your allies to help you see what you really are doing right. And also they, you know, to give you corrections, to give you counter ideas, to give you the counterbalance that you need in your life. So rest is actually warfare, is actually a weapon that you can use against that stuff, because that's what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to calm down and think things through. They don't want you to take time to really enjoy what it is you're doing and really think about the big picture of it all. They want you frantic and frenetic and losing your mind over the stuff that they are seeding into you, that are things to get scared about, things to be upset about. And that's the last thing you want to do, because desperation and fear and anxiety and panic and all that kind of stuff, depression, anger, those things don't help you when you want to be creative. They don't help you when you're trying to solve problems. a lot of those emotions, they're good in the short term. They're good in the moment that, something, an extreme example of something happens, oh, there's a lion that confronts you. Okay, it's a good time to be in fight or flight. It's a good time to make a decision really quickly and do something to save your life. But the rest of the time, like, you don't want to be caught up in a constant, like, loop of these things. Like, they have their purpose in short bursts and intervals of time and in certain processes, like with a grieving process. But for just your regular life and the things that you want to do and being on the go and toes forward and making a difference in the world, you can't do that when you're in these negative states. And that's what people are going to push you into when that's their sort of their MO. Like, they might just be a negative person themselves. They might just be in that kind of state continually themselves. And what bothers them is that you're not. It's going to be the challenge to see those people for who they are. And sometimes they are people that you actually know really well. They might be relatives. They might be parents, unfortunately. They might be, friends that you've had around you, people you've thought of as friends. They might just be schoolmates that you grew up with. They might be teachers, mentors. It could just be that where you're going now is something that they don't understand, is something that's not familiar to them, or it scares them, or it challenges them because it's something they haven't been willing to do themselves. And when that happens, you have to be able to let them go. You have to be able to identify that they've become enemies of your calling. They've become enemies of your lifestyle or of your identity. They're tearing you down in who you are, and you've got to see that for what it is. And one of the ways that you do that, again, is rest. So rest has been a very difficult thing for me. It's not been easy, and it's something I'm still learning to do. But we need rhythms in life. We can't just go and never stop. You can't just go insane with constant productivity and work and never stopping to reflect and think and meditate. And, you need to connect with God. You need to connect with the universe, nature around you. You need to connect with friends and family. You need to connect with yourself. You need times to check in with yourself. And, if you work for yourself, if you are a creator, if you're doing things that are your own way, it's really tempting to just never stop working. Like, if your office is your home and your home is your office, then it's very difficult to ever make yourself stop working in that environment, because your brain is just automatically like, oh, what else can I do? Oh, I should be doing this over here. And it's hard to just make yourself stop and relax and enjoy things. And, the thinking that you actually will do when you're in rest time, when you're actually being calm and either just focused on something that you're enjoying, or just letting yourself pick up all the sensory input from the things around you, or sleeping, or whatever, that you're doing, that's refueling, that's refreshing, that's giving you something to actually work with. Now, of course, there has to be a balance. You can't just be watching TV all the time. You can't just be, caught up on shorts, caught up on TikToks all the time. You've got to actually be doing something, with what you're putting into you. And you want to have good quality fuel, like, you want to be a car that has half nasty rainwater and half gasoline, or do you want a car that has, premium high octane fuel put in it? And which car do you think is going to work better? Obviously, it's going to be the one that it doesn't have the rainwater. So you want to have good quality fuel. You want to have good quality rest, things that are actually adding to your enjoyment, things that are actually giving you something to work with and move forward with. And that doesn't mean it has to be boring. That doesn't mean that it has to be like the usual or whatever. It can be fun and exciting and novel. It can be things that you've never explored before. Sometimes it can be something familiar. Sometimes it can be something that's reliable, that's dependable, that kind of sets you in a calm space, sort of like a droning song, a chant, a droning cello note, something as an example that lets you sort of fix yourself in space and time for a moment. And, breathing exercises can be very helpful. There's a lot of different things that are good techniques and good things just to stop throughout the day. We like to do journaling. We do what we call two-way journaling, which is where we actually write a letter to God. And after we have sort of said our piece and given it to Him, we then basically just sit and wait and listen for what comes to us. And, Sometimes we'll get an impression. We'll kind of have a picture of something or a vision of something that just kind of comes into our mind, or we'll begin to kind of get maybe a dialogue back and forth. But especially as we ask questions, as we put ourselves out there, make ourselves available in that journaling, which we try to do on a daily basis, we'll find that answers will come to us that we didn't have before. New thoughts will come to us, things that we didn't even realize we were worrying about. Like all of a sudden now it'll get pointed out to us and we'll be able to release it. And we get comfort and reassurance and a sense of direction. And it grounds us and it gives us peace as we're stepping into the unknown, as we're, there's so much that you can't control as an artist. There's so much that you can't control as a creative type. And the things that we do, it's not like a stable paycheck. It's not like a running a store or just working a job. It's a completely different animal in a lot of ways. And so you have to have a lot of faith, and you have to have a lot of hope, and you have to believe that what you're doing really matters. And you have to know that God is with you, because otherwise, it's crazy. It's crazy to be doing something that has no certain outcomes, and other people think you're crazy, and it's just challenging. So we've definitely seen that we need that time, and the rest is just as vital as the work. So I want to invite you now to kind of go through this and think for yourself, who are my enemies? What are the things that are being said to me that are undermining my confidence, that are making me feel less, that are making me doubt that I can do these things that I really want to do in my life? And second of all, am I sure about these things? When you take those voices out, when you take that stuff out, do I really believe in this? Is this really something that I know was meant for me? Do your journaling. Take your time to think it through. Because sometimes, they're testing your conviction. They're helping you realize if this really is your thing, or if you've just kind of landed there. If you just kind of fell in love with an idea and maybe it's not the right idea. Like it's a good time sometimes to step back and say, okay, is this really for me? But reaffirm yourself, remind yourself, think about why you are where you are, what this is really about. What's the vision? Why did you get started with this? Is this something that you really want for your life? Is it worth the cost, whether or not you're successful, just doing the thing itself? And if the answer is yes, then you don't need to worry about what those other people are saying and thinking. And you need to get in touch with that inner critic and that voice inside your head, that inner self-saboteur. You need to put them in their place. So often what you'll find is that it's lies that have been brought against you. And the whole thing is just trying to discourage you. It's just trying to undermine your beliefs, undermine your hope, make you give up. And that's the biggest battle. Because if you can outlast the discouragement, if you can fully discipline yourself, fully pour your life into what you believe you are called to do, and you can just go after it. And as long as you have the flexibility to see and realize wherever you might need to make adjustments and change things and adapt parts that are not easy, that don't come naturally to you, well, you have to make that decision. Is this really something that I want and need in my life? Is this really important to me? Is this vital? And if it is, then I'm going to do it even if it's really, really hard. I'm going to do it even if it doesn't just come naturally to me. As long as it's going to be the best I can be, and it's really going to serve what it is I'm doing. It's going to serve my vision. So, hey, I hope you like this episode of the Shawn Douglas Show. If this has been enjoyable for you, please like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate it. I'm just starting out on this. This is brand new for me, brand new journey. I don't even know what this is going to look like in post, so I hope it's great. I hope you guys have a blessed day and that you continue moving toward your destiny and finding your place in this world.